Hey guys, welcome to another episode of All Bass Creations, Effects, Tutorials, Demos, and Review. Today we'll be going over compression and limiting pretty much. A really useful effect. It kind of gets overlooked because it's not the fanciest of effects, but it's a necessary effect in whether you're playing live or in the studio or wherever. So what you just heard just then was a combination of preamps and compression. So let's just go through a bit of what I have on here. I have only thing you cannot see is I have a pedal board on the floor, and that on that B6, the B3, excuse me, the Zoom B3, I'm running the 160 compressor. And this same compressor is available on the B3, the MS60B, the new one as well, the MS60B Plus, the B6, the B14, the B24. It's a standard Zoom compressor, but it emulates the DBX 160A rack compressor, which is a famous compressor from the 80s, which is really nice compression. But if you don't want to carry around a rack, you can grab one of these Zoom pedals, or just this applies to any compressor. These settings. So, um, what I typically what I would typically do is set the threshold to -6, and the ratio. So the threshold is when how loud the sound gets before the compressor actually kicks in. So anything that gets up to that -6 threshold is going to bring it back down to and compress it by this ratio of 2.1. So it's gonna cut it down just a little bit, not too much. Not at 2.1 is not the hardest compression. Very light compression is what I like in the beginning of my chain. That way I get as natural of a sound, but without while still evening out some of the peaks of the sound, so it's not like overbearing, but also brings out a little bit more of the characteristics of your fingers in your playing. So let's get a little bit of that by itself, and I have that set to the gain on that is 0 and the knee set to hard. So let's take all this stuff off real quick. And we'll be going through a few different compressors, not just on the Zoom stuff, but I also have the TC Electronics Spectracomp, which is one of my favorite multi-band compressors. Make sure y'all subscribe, like, and share. Let's not get too far without doing none of that. I need y'all on that. And if these videos help you out and you want to see them keep coming, definitely hit the super thanks and the Cash App, Cash Sign Reggie Payne Bass, and I definitely appreciate y'all. You know helping a brother out, especially if you get something from my videos, I would appreciate it a lot. Thank you. So, let's start with just my bass dry. So, nice sounding bass. Um, Kick on that 160 compressor. So as you can see, just kicking on a basic compressor, and I'll do it on the B6 real quick on here as well. So let's change this to a 160 compressor. Bam. So same settings, -6, ratio 2 to 1, hard knee. And so again, without it, with it. So as you can hear, very nice sound to it, you know. Those are the settings there. So back to the, hold on, let me change this real quick, guys. Give me 1 second. Not that. So basically, you're kind of just evening things out. You know, you're not trying to get rid of everything. You know, all your dynamics. You need your dynamics. But you definitely want to have something that controls those peaks on bass, especially when you got like that low B string. So I'm gonna do a comparison real quick. So I just brought the volume down just a little bit so you can kind of hear it without the volume bias type thing, you know. So here's without it. Here's with it. Without it. So as you can see, it brings out the beef without you having to boost all your, over accentuate your lows. It also brings out, good parts of those mids and highs as well, It brings down those lows and it allows you to, essentially, it leaves a lot of the highs, unless you really crank the highs. It leaves a lot of that treble unaffected. If it's a good compressor, you have it set properly. So pretty much the only thing you really need to compress is your mids and your lows. A lot of times the high end on a bass, you're not, some basses are really heavy on the highs. Like mine is really bright, so I also use Diodario Pro Steel, so it doesn't make it any less brighter, But it's definitely a thing of preference, and you just kind of experiment with them. So that would be something like a basic. This is a basic compressor right here. Something. They got some other models on here as well that are really good, that emulate other types of compressors. Some compressors allow you to control the lows and the highs and things like that, EQ of it, and but overall, one of my favorite types of compression. Let's put this back. I like this limiter, but we'll get to the limiter in a second. I made my own setting for my Spectracomp, TC Electronics Spectracomp, which is this little pedal right here, up there at the top of the screen there, and it's a very unassuming pedal. You can beam in effects and things like that to it from your phone or your iPad or whatever. So, but here's some of that, and this is without anything else on it. is without it. So as you can see, it does add a boost in volume just a little bit. But right now I don't feel like going in and messing with the settings, so it doesn't do that. So, but it is going to be a little volume difference between these two, the dry signal and the compressed signal. And it's a multi-band compressor, meaning it's a 3-band multi-band compressor, so it compresses the lows, the mids, and the highs all separately. That's one of the reasons why I love this head right here, this TC Electronic BH500 head. I love that joint. That's like my favorite. It's like one of my favorite heads. It's 30 pounds, and I'm just fixing not to carry that out the house. I'm not carrying a 30-pound head no more. That Harkey is only 7 pounds. You know, granted, it sounds amazing. So and it's great. The cabinet itself is only like 50 pounds, so it's not a heavy 410 cabinet to be 410s. That 115 on the bottom there is about 42 pounds. So that 410s on the TC Electronic 410s on top, and that's a Fender Bassman Neo 115 on the bottom. Can't really see it because I'm sitting in the way, but on top of it is a TC Electronic BC 410. That's 50 pounds. The head is 30 pounds. That's 70 pounds for. It is 500 watts, and it does. I mean, it's a real 500 watts. It kicks. It'll blow your head off. But yeah, I digress. Let's keep going. These, when you're using a live amp, the compressors definitely help out when you're playing live with a band. Helps you cut through a lot easier without you digging so hard, especially if you're slapping and popping or you want to use your harmonics and things. It'll help those cut through in the mix a lot better. So here's my bass without it. With the TC Electronic Special Comp. So as you see, for the tapping, it definitely makes my life a lot easier. And I can add more of it if I need to, or less. Wow. It just evens it right out. Like, and it automatically now, without it, it's not as, so when you're tapping and things like that, or even slapping and popping, doing a little bit of mixing that stuff up in there. Without it, you have such a wide variety of, because of the techniques, needing different dynamic levels for different reasons. Like a slap and pop is going to need those heavier accents to make sure that you're situating certain things and get that real percussive sound. Like you need the louder ones as much as you need the ghost notes or the softer ones. So you need those accents to accent it. You know, to be you need those accents to be accent. You need those accents in order to make it feel a certain type of way at certain moments. Um, so you know that the compressor definitely helps out with that. You know, ooh. But with the tapping thing, so if you tap without it, here we go. It's you can hear it, but you know, um, that was actually with it. But if you do it without it, it's just softer. It's way softer, and I have to work way harder. So it's way more even. So it's much more of a controlled sound with the compression on. You know, you don't need a ton of it. You know, but having it on definitely helps. So me personally, you know, sometimes I might, certain situations I might not actually compress. I might only have a limiter on, which is why I use the limiter 76 on the B6, which is, like I said, it's 1176, which is a compressor slash limiter. One of the most famous ones, like a lot of the Cali 76 compressor, I believe, is based on it. They have one based on it. Or is it Pigtronics? One of those. It's a couple different emulations of it, as well as a bunch of plugins that emulate it as well. It's one of the most famous, you know, compression tools ever. So people are definitely going to emulate it. But here's my settings. My settings for that would be 14, 4 to 1, 33. And let's see what that does with the tapping. Let's bring that ratio up to 8.1. Without it. as you can see, it's a very subtle effect. Turning it up some more with the ratio. The more the ratio it is, the more compressed that when it hits that peak, when it hits that threshold, the more it's going to compress it. So now we're going at 12 to 1. So it compresses it very nicely without affecting like the tone completely. Like they're very similar tones, but one is like a more polished sound to it with the limiter on, versus with it off. So, a lot of times I'll take like that, like I said, that 160 compressor, run that in the beginning, run a preamp, so basically I'm running the compressor into the preamp, the Magellan preamp, and then I can either use my Spectra comp as a limiter type thing, or I can use it as an additional way to compress the sound with the individual bands a little bit more. And depending on the sound, so when I'm tapping, I might prefer the TC Electronic Spectracom, but when I'm playing overall, I might just want that limiter at the end. So that's why I have, so pretty much the pedal board on the floor. Let me see, give you guys a quick peek at that. So this pedal board here on the floor, it has the Zoom B3 on there, and you got all these other pedals on there as well. So, all the electro-harmonics pedals, basically. But, yeah, great sound to it. So I still use it. I like that, even though it's an older pedal. That pedal like almost 10 years old now. So, but I got that 160 compressor running on there. Alright, so that's running into the Magellan preamp. So what you're hearing right now is just the compressor into the preamp. Without it, without the compressor rather, the preamp just by itself. With the compressor, the 160 compressor. Without it. So it just makes it, even going into the compressor, into the preamp, it makes it a much better, more even tone. Brings out, make sure none of that, the nuances of your playing are getting lost in that mix there. So then from there, like I said, I like to run that limiter. So, you got the 1176 limiter right there. Those are the settings. bring that back to 4-1. And the reason why I'm only compressing it, I'm limiting it by 4-1 instead of like something higher is because by the time I don't want the front of the house or the studio engineer not to be able to incorporate whatever compression they want. So I don't want to over compress the sound. Then they don't have any control over anything. I still leaving, granted I have a lot going on before it gets to them. Um, I don't want to do so much that it doesn't allow them to do what they need to do professionally because I can't hear what they're hearing out there. I can hear what I'm hearing on stage. So their job is kind of to translate my sound from here to out there, and I can't hear what that is, and that might feel different or have different needs than what I need on stage. So I just use the minimum amount of compression before. So I'm using the 2-1 to go in, and then coming out, I know I'm gonna have some frequencies boosted, and because I have the Magellan preamp or whatever preamp, I'm gonna have something boosted on there. And it just I'm just hitting those peaks. I'm just kissing those peaks to bring it down just a little and bring out some of my nuances in my playing, so I don't have to play as hard. Sometimes when if you're running a nice scoop sound, it gets some of that gets lost in there. So when I'm playing live, I definitely prefer to have some sort of compression going on. Just the same way I prefer some form of EQ or preamp. Things like that, things that color my sound a certain way and give me the things I need in my tones. So let's look at so here's the limiter with the 160 compressor going into the Magellan preamp, and that's running into the 1176 style limiter. Here we go. But as you can see, even with both of those, the 160 compressor and the limiter on at the same time, I still got a ton of dynamics left in there. I didn't squash it out. Sometimes I guess, that can be useful, squashing it. I never found a use for that. Personally, I don't like a squash bass sound. So I like it to sound natural but clear. So I want to get to basically the sound as clear as possible. So I know the sound I'm trying to translate, and basically I'm just trying to get that to go as far as possible. So, I add something like this pre 1073 for some saturation, and nothing's let me see. So nothing's on it, necessarily. It's just a little bit of I don't even need any extra gain right now, so turn that down, and then bam, no EQ on there, and then I got this IR running, which is a Aguilar 410 with a tweeter. It's mic'd up with a SM57 and a RE20. So those are the settings for that, and as you can see on the balance there, it's -11. So I inverted the phase of it, and I also have it's pretty much 89% dry of the preamp sound. that you were just hearing, but with some IR on it. So and see now I'm just when you got it set up like that, you can just run through your different preamps. So now the Aguilar is on. So and if you got something like the SGT, it has a built-in compressor. So you don't actually need the 160 down bottom. Um, Matter of fact, I believe that compressor is towards the end of the chain of effects on this SGT. It's a 10 to 1 ratio on it. So I would say just a little bit. You know, I just wanted to hit that compressor just a little bit. I took the other two compressors off. Matter of fact, let's take all this other stuff off. Here's the SGT without the compressor on it. Right? Nice sound. Add the compressor, and it's around 9 o'clock. And you can keep going, and let's see, let's put it around 12. Very squash sound, as you can see. If you keep going to 3 o'clock. And as you can see, at that point, pretty much all your dynamics are gone. You got one dynamic, and if you're playing soft, it's just a slight tone change. It's no volume change to it. It's just literally a tone change when you're digging in and when you're not digging in, pretty much. One sounds spankier and one sounds, less intense, but it's no volume. They're both the same volume. So that, I would say, is over compressing. But around anywhere from like just a little bit on this SGT would be something like what is that, 7 o'clock? No, it's like 8 o'clock. 8 to 9 o'clock would be like a nice mild compression on this SGT, and it's an optical compressor. Like I said, at a 10 to 1 ratio. They're classic compressor that you can, that's on some of their amps. So, compression is a great tool to really even out that sound. I love the way the Spectra Comp does it as well. Let's see what the hmm uh Well, let's see what it sounds like when it's coming through an actual speaker as well for you guys. I got this Zoom H5 over here, so let's see what that sounds like um, in the actual room with the compressors. So here's going to be just the. See, let's start with the Magellan. Um, Magellan Pre. It's going to be just a Magellan Pre used as the preamp for the Harkey TX600 head running into the Fender 115 bass man Neo. You know, it's the speaker on the bottom, basically. 115 on the bottom with a tweeter. Zoom's recording it, basically. Here we go. So that's without a compressor. Here's the 160 compressor on the B3 running into the Magellan. So that's the 160 compressor. Here's the TC electronic Spectracomp running after the Magellan. And here is the 1176 style compressor, the limit 76 on the B6 running after the Magellan. So, you know, it can get a nice, very nice sound. Very nice sound. Um, Let me see. I'm gonna do the same thing with the AG preamp and the SGT. I'll let you know when I get to SGT. AG preamp real quick. And this is just so you can see how its compression can bring out more of the characteristics of just the preamp. You know, it can bring out more of the characteristics of your bass, you know, depending on when you're compressing in your signal. So say like when I want more of my actual basses, natural, you know, all the characteristics to come through even more, I definitely would want to compress before I go into the preamp. I'm still going to limit before the speaker. At some point, I'm going to have a limiter before it gets to the cabinet or the IR. That's why the B6 is set up this way on the screen, on the iPad, you know. But the, and also keep this TC Electronic Spectracomp after. This is everything my entire board runs through that TC Electronic Spectracomp pretty much it's at the very end of my signal, even after my looper, because I even run my loops into it because I want my loops to be a little more even, and I don't want certain things just jumping out too much when I'm looping even. So it's just a good compressors are amazing to balance out stuff, and it also makes your amp seem louder. Like it's not even seeming loud. It technically will get a boost with a lot of compressors because they typically will give you a bit of more gain, but um, it's gonna make everything. It's like it's pushing the entire sound forward versus when you use a standard bass amp by itself. It seems like it makes a wider tone. It just makes a tighter sound, and brings up some of the nuances and also brings down certain frequencies that might be overpowering all the other frequencies, which is going to make a huge difference in the mix and how you sound to the crowd. It's a very subtle thing, but it's definitely something that's worth investing into one way or another. If you don't have, um, a lot of times we already have something like a multi effects pedal, so you probably got a compressor on there that you might underutilize, or various forms of, because even this B6 has, and all the Zoom stuff, I have a bunch of compression pedals. It's got an optical compressor on there, this black optical compressor, and I actually like that one as well. I like of course, the Limiter 76, the 160 compressor, and I actually like that glam compressor they got on there as well. Um, MB compressor, the multi-band compressor on the B6, I could live without. I definitely prefer my TC Electronic Spectra Comp as a standalone pedal. Only thing I've been, considering getting a analog compressor, but you know, a lot of times by the time you get to the music out to folks and all that good stuff, except for live, it's like by the time even live, the sound engineers usually are using digital racks. They're not really using all analog compressors and all that. They're using a lot of times they're bringing using digital compressors and digital EQs and all this other stuff on your stuff anyway. So it's like you're never going to get a complete analog path from you directly to the audience. Very rarely, at least. Um, Especially these days, like you gotta record on tape and all this extra stuff. Like it's such a process to do all analog today. I'm not even sure if certain effects. That's why only certain effects I I buy the analog version, like the preamps. I need an analog preamp because it makes an entirely different. It makes a difference in the size and the warmth of my sound versus all analog modulations and stuff like that. It's a lot. It gets to be a lot, especially it gets to be expensive. Gets to be very expensive, but you can get digital emulations of those same effects, and you'll be just fine. I mean, people are not going to know that they're not listening for digital or analog. People are listening if it sounds good, how it makes them feel, things like that. So always keep that in mind. You don't always need the latest, greatest gear. You more so need to be able to translate your sound that you hear in your head through your fingers and out to the audiences the best way possible. Whether digital, analog, whatever does that, gets that to you is what you want to go with. Analog compressors, like I said, the Cali 76 one is like $350. It's very expensive. The Empress compressor one is expensive. All the analog compressors are going to run you as much as you would pay for a preamp or something. Like, you talking about the AG and the Magellan are both 300. This is 400. So you want to mitigate costs somewhere. That's why I use these Zoom pedals because they sound really good, and they're very flexible, meaning I can have them at various points on my pedal board here and here, and I'm swapping out. I got 10 between the two of them. That's 10 effects slots that I can manipulate things and change without ever changing my pedal board. As long as I have those placed strategically throughout my pedal board, I can easily swap in and out effects without ever adding any new effects pedals. Um, you know, so that's something to think about as well. With the digital compressors, do you want to, you know, do you actually need a separate analog compressor because I mean I really don't. I even my Spectra comp, that's a digital compressor, but it allows me to. It's really small. It's one of my favorite compressors in general. Even on the actual TC Electronic Spectra comp on the actual head, that's my actual favorite compressor. It sounds different than the one on the pedal, so unfortunately, but yeah, I love. That's my favorite compressor is the one that's on that head, that big red head there. You know. But let's um let's go through the Aguilar real quick, and then we'll go through the SUT, and then we'll get out of here, guys. So here's without anything on. It's just the AG head with the 160 compressor. 160 compressor running into the AG head. Right? And here's the AG head running into the TC Electronic Spectra comp. And here is the AG head running into the AG preamp running into the 1176 style limiter. So you got to kind of pick where you want to do your compression at there. And I just ran back through at the end there, the last few seconds there. I was running through all three scenarios. So you can pick whether you want to compress at the end of your chain, whether you want to have a multi-band compressor or a full band compressor. Um, Let me see. I got an Eden down here. So this Eden has its own compressor. So this is what the Eden sounds like. Eden WTDI. Let me see. Let me see. Let me see. This is. I don't know if you guys can even see that. Let me see. Eesh. Is this one all the way over here down on the floor? Um. Yeah. Here we go. And this is a full band compressor. So I'm gonna turn it up to about 11 o'clock. So as you can hear, like I just turned the compressor way up on that to around 2 o'clock, and the compressor all the way up. So as you can hear, it compresses it a lot more, when it's all the way up. But typically around 11 o'clock, that's compressor is going to be fine. If you want to have an all analog signal path on in the amp head in the amp preamp at the same time, I would go with something like that, either WTDI, which you have to find used, but there is a lot of those used lying around. So that plus, like I said, then you got the SGT. You can run the 160 compressor into that. Okay, we're going to switch on the TC Electronic Spectracomp after the SGT. And the 1176 style limiter. So as you can see, it gives you plenty of options, with your sound. Just the compressor, like you probably didn't even realize how much the compressor affected your sound, even the tone of it, like where you're placing it and you placing it before or after things. So definitely compression is an absolute essential tool for an electric bassist. Like I said, you can just use that and compression, use your bass sound, if you're, your bass sound and compression, and it's gonna change everything for you in terms of um, I would say even on a gig, it's gonna allow you to cut so much through, but you gotta pay attention to what type of compression you're using and when you're using it. You know, like I said, that the 1176 one lets me retain a lot more bottom than the way I had the Spectracomp set up. The Spectracomp compresses, grabs that bottom and brings it down to match where everything sounds so even. Compared to the 1176 is, is a lot warmer, and even the compressor on that Eden pedal is pretty warm. The one on the SGT is okay. I never really cared for it too much, but in the pinch, in terms of everything together on one unit, the SGT is an amazing tool. So, but the compressor on there is just okay. But my favorites out of these digital ones is going to be that limiter, the 1176 limiter and the 160 compressor. In terms of compression, that 160 compressor is really good. Like it's hold on, let me turn it. You would think that it was not as good because it's pretty much it's just like it's like a plug-in. Think of it like a plug-in. It's an emulation plug-in. So I would say, just pick what you want to use. If you like if these suffice for you, they're all throughout the Zoom lineup. The 160 and compressor and the limit 76. But you also have other ones on there. You can check out those. I'm not a big fan of all those. Like I said, my favorites on the B6 is going to be the Black Op. Give you a little. It's one of my favorites, but my favorite is the 160 compressor and the 1176 limiter. So you take something like this, bring that compression down. You can get a nice scoop sound even without adding an EQ. This way as well. So let's take out this preamp, and we'll go back into the system now. Without it. With it. You can run that into the IR. You can run it after the IR. You see, and it just depending on where you are compressing that, it just makes a huge difference. So if I was going to run it after the IR, I definitely would run one of my preamps before. Here's the Magellan and the IR by themselves. Right, with the compressor. So definitely a nice amount of compression on there, like I said, you could run that before and it sounds totally different. And just so you can hear it in the room, in the cabinet, coming through an actual cabinet. So, yeah, it's a great compression is a great effect, guys. So make sure that you are getting into compressors. Don't leave them out. And like I said, they make a world of a difference in your sound and you cutting through. You're not gonna. It's gonna be compressed one way or another. You can control it or learn how to control it and get it to where you want it to be, or you can wait for somebody else to do it on the front of the house. But there's gonna be some compression in there somewhere and limiting. Especially because you're playing bass and there's a lot of, especially on these lower strings, there's a lot of booty in there. You gotta mitigate that. You know what I'm saying? Especially depending on the room you're in, it can be a compression can be the difference between everything going crazy or everything being nice and tight and sounding good. So you want to definitely make sure you're experimenting with compression and where you have it in your effects chain, where you how much of it you're using, and just be mindful that somebody else has to work with your tone at some point if you're running to the front of the house or if you're running in the studio. So if you over compress it, if you do too much, basically, they don't have any wiggle room to do what they need to do to make the entire record sound glued together and sound good. And they might sidechain the bass with the kick drum, and that needs to be able to be done so that the kick and the bass sit right in the mix together. But if you did too much compressing, then they can't even get that right. So you know what I'm saying? Like it makes everybody have a headache if you overdo it. You'll be better underdoing it a little bit than overdoing it, just so the engineer has some more room. But and they don't, they won't hate you at the end of the day. So hopefully this has been an informational video for you guys about compression. If you like what you see, subscribe, like, and share. Make sure you hit the super thanks if this was really useful. If this you finally understand how to use compression, great. Oh, and I would say this as a rule of thumb: attack, low attack, long release. You know what I'm saying? So you can use a shorter attack on your if you got these. With the thresholds, you want to have the threshold high enough where it's not being hit all the time, every single time you're playing. But you want it to also have it at a ratio where when it does hit it, it doesn't overdo it. I think for most people, I think if you keep it around 2-1 or 4-1, most engineers are gonna be fine. You start getting into 8-1 and above, 8-1, and it becomes. They might say it's a little too compressed for them. So I would keep it around there and just keep your threshold high enough to where it's not hitting all the time, like every single note. So you keep your dynamics, and then from there you just enjoy playing and enjoy being cutting through the mix, and not having to dig into, because digging in changes your tone of the note that you might have wanted to sound like a certain way. You dig in too much, it's gonna sound a whole different way. So make sure you are compressing properly. But this has been another episode of All Bass Creations, Effects, Tutorials, Demos, Review. We got a lot more coming. I mean, when I say a lot more, I'm going to ramp it up so much, guys. It's going to be bananas. Like, you're going to be able to find everything you need for bass on this channel. Every single thing you ever needed for playing a bass guitar, you'll be able to find right here. So make sure you subscribe, like, and share. And I'm getting this Patreon together. Let me know when you guys are interested in my improvisation course. I'm in the middle of getting that together. So if you want to be able to improvise and build your own solos and techniques and things like that, I got something coming up for you guys. So it's been another episode of All Bass Creations, Effects, Tutorials, Demos, Review. I'll catch you guys next time. Find me on all social media at The Bass Negus, Negus, and all my music at allbasscreations.bandcamp. Peace.